I watched episode 2 of Netflix new series 100 Years of Solitude last night. It continues to unspool beautifully, and I have a couple things for you guys. I did want to say that I was amazed that my first video on episode 1 went viral, and I've been around the internet long enough to know that, it's kind of a casino, but it was nice to see that people put all these lovely comments on about how excited they were about Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I suggested in my review of episode 1 that one way to understand 100 Years of Solitude is as a retelling of the mythic story of Arcadia, or a lost rural paradise. One way to think about episode 2 is that it's the story of two Jose Arcadios. There's Jose Arcadio Sr., the founder of Macondo, the little microcosm where the whole story takes place, and there's his son, Jose Arcadio Jr. And we know that even though it's sort of got aspects of a lost Eden or a lost sort of Arcadia, it's also the case that there's something badly wrong with the human situation. There's folly at play. And one of the main themes of that in the novel is incest, which is a disturbing theme, but I think it's in part a stand-in for the way we inherit our dysfunction. We can't get away from our dysfunction. Let's talk about the men in this novel. Part of what's really gone wrong with them are their obsessions. And that goes for the women too, but with the men, it's on hyperdrive. The men are monomaniacs and they have obsessions. Jose Arcadio Sr., Melquiades, the gypsy, shows up, gives the beautiful gift of learning to him, of the new sciences and whatnot, but he takes it in this humorous but also dark direction. So when we open episode 2, he's trying to use a magnifying glass, which he realizes you can concentrate the sun to burn things, into making a weapon of war. So he has, and it's supposed to be funny, but it's supposed to be sort of dark funny, that this magnifying glass, he thinks he could burn up the opposing side with it. It's a completely ludicrous, useless military idea, and in a weird way, it's kind of ingenious too. So here is Jose Arcadio Sr. using learning and to a foul end. He also gets obsessed with alchemy, and the reader's supposed to be in on the joke that, of course, alchemy is a pseudoscience. So part of the joke is Jose Arcadio Sr. is overestimating the power of science. And there the end isn't power or domination, it's money. He keeps trying to turn Ursula, his wife's gold coins, into more gold, and he keeps ruining him. He's even told at one point by his son, hey, those look like dog shit. What you tried to make into gold actually looks like dog shit. And so there's all this kind of jokey element of Jose Arcadio is basically losing touch with his family, his wife. He's not raising his kids properly because he's obsessed and in the laboratory all the time trying to pursue wealth and power. And yet who's having to fill the gap? This wonderful character, Ursula, who starts making candy to try to support the family. So the man of science is actually losing touch with reality, is the paradox, and he's losing touch with everything around him. And the way that Garcia Marquez shows this in a way that's humorous is that Amaranta, his newborn daughter, starts to levitate, and Jose Arcadio just kind of looks over his shoulder and says to his son Aureliano, who's amazed, hey, that's just physical matter, I've got a scientific explanation for that, don't bother with it. And he sort of pushes the crib back down in a visual joke. But he's basically lost touch with the enchantment of reality, in part because he's so much in his head. And so part of the curse that's being passed down here is a man who he desperately wants to control reality, and yet he loses contact with it. What about Jose Arcadio Jr., his son? Well, basically, to put it kind of grossly, I apologize, but his main obsession is with his physical endowment, if you see what I mean. There is a scene where Ursula walks in on her son. He's just come into manhood, and he has a enormous, exaggerated endowment. And what's said narratively is so fascinating, that point, because Ursula says it was like the pig's tail. Remember, she was worried her kids were all going to have pig's tails because she married her cousin, Jose Arcadio, and had kids with him. She's saying it's like the pig's tail was actually the endowment. In terms of obsession, Jose Arcadio Jr. is obsessed with his physical endowment. He has a child out of wedlock with Pilar. Then he runs off with a gypsy, but he's obsessed with sexual lust. A very famous story that Garcia Marquez was surely aware of in Confessions, in which Augustine's dad sees him showering and is kind of amazed by his physical endowment as well, and thinks, oh, I'm going to have a wonderful line of children. And Monica, Augustine's mother, responds by saying that that's a disordered response to that there's something wrong at looking at his own son that way. And it's a very famous episode in the Confessions. And clearly Garcia Marquez echoes that. Jose Arcadio Jr. is no St. Augustine at all. He is guided and led around by his, penis. And how many men, by the way, in the world are guided around by this, right? And so part of the point exaggerated and through magical realism of making his physical endowment so large is to show his obsession is huge, and he's not really in control. He's being pulled around by one part of his body. Hello, my name is Jason Blakely. I'm a professor of political philosophy at Pepperdine University in California, and you can follow me on here for talk of philosophy, politics, political theory, and culture. I also recently wrote a book called Lost in Ideology.